The day I learned my sister sold our parents' house, I was still wearing black. I remember because the fabric of that dress scratched the inside of my elbows as I stood in the kitchen, staring at my phone like it had just spoken a language I didn't understand. The house was quiet in that way grief makes everything quiet. No humming refrigerator, no ticking clock, just the sound of my own breath moving in and out like it was trying to convince me to stay upright. Congratulations on the successful closing, the email said. Funds have been transferred. At first, I thought it was spam. I had just buried my mother 3 weeks earlier. My mind was foggy, heavy, still moving through days like I was underwater. I reread the email slowly, my thumb dragging across the screen, my heart beginning to beat in a way that didn't match the calm of the room. Successful closing. Property address, 114 Willow Lane. That was our house, our childhood home, and I hadn't signed a thing. Before all of this, my life was ordinary in the best way, predictable, safe. I worked as an office administrator for a small insurance firm downtown, the kind of job where people forgot your name but trusted you with their paperwork. I liked it that way. I'd been there 17 years, long enough to know which copier jammed on humid days and which coworkers needed their coffee exactly 3 fingers from the rim. I lived alone in a modest apartment on the south side of town, 10 minutes from the hospital where my mother had spent the last year of her life going back and forth like a visitor who couldn't quite decide whether to stay. My evenings were quiet, dinner for one, the television on low. Sometimes I'd fall asleep before the 10 o'clock news, the remote warm in my palm. My sister, Denise, lived very differently. She was 3 years younger than me, but people often thought she was older, not because of wrinkles or age, but because of the way she carried herself. Confident, loud when she wanted to be, charming when it served her. Denise had always known how to step into a room and make it bend around her. Growing up, our parents' house had been the center of everything. Yellow siding that needed repainting, a narrow porch where my father used to sit in the evenings with a glass of iced tea, waving at neighbors like he owned the street. The maple tree in the front yard leaned slightly to the left, its roots pushing up the concrete like it was trying to escape. That house smelled like Sunday dinners and old furniture polish, like burnt toast on rushed school mornings, like my mother's lavender hand cream, which she rubbed into her palms every night before bed. When Dad died 10 years ago, the house became even more important. It was where holidays still happened, where memories lived untouched. And when Mom got sick, it was understood, at least I thought it was, that nothing would change. Denise and I talked about it once, sitting at Mom's dining table while she slept in the next room, the oxygen machine humming softly through the thin walls. "We'll deal with the house later," Denise said, stirring sugar into her coffee even though she never drank it sweet. "Right now, it's about Mom." I nodded. I believed her. I always had. Mom's illness was slow and cruel, the kind that didn't take her all at once, but shaved pieces away day by day. I was the one who took her to appointments, who learned how to change dressings and manage medications. Denise came when she could, which was often less than she promised. She had her reasons, work, kids, traffic, but I didn't argue. I told myself people show love differently. Still, there were moments, little ones, moments I tucked away and tried not to look at too closely. Like how Denise insisted on handling Mom's finances to help, even though I was the one paying the bills and balancing the checkbook at night with a cup of chamomile tea. Or how she'd take phone calls outside when she visited, pacing the driveway with her voice low, glancing back at the house like she didn't want us to hear. I noticed, I just didn't want to know. The day Mom died, the house felt hollow, not empty, hollow, like something had been scooped out of the walls. I stood in her bedroom long after the nurse left, my hand resting on the indentation her body had left in the mattress, my chest aching with grief so sharp it felt physical. Denise arrived an hour later, eyes red, hair pulled back too tightly. She hugged me, but her arms were stiff, her body already pulling away before I was ready to let go. "We'll get through this," she said, "together." I clung to those words like they were a promise. The funeral passed in a blur of casseroles and condolences. People I hadn't seen in years hugged me like they knew my pain intimately. Denise moved through it all like a host at her own event, directing people, collecting sympathy with practiced grace. Afterwards, I retreated into myself, took time off work, slept in my clothes, let unopened mail pile up on the counter. Grief made everything feel optional, including time. So when that email arrived, successful closing, it felt like an intrusion, like the world moving forward without my permission. I called Denise immediately. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. "Hey, it's me," I said, my voice sounding small even to my own ears. "Call me when you get this, please." I stared at the phone, willing it to ring back. It didn't. That night, I drove to 114 Willow Lane without thinking about it. The porch light was off, the driveway was empty. The house looked the same from the outside, but something felt different, like it no longer recognized me. I sat in my car and cried until my chest hurt, because somewhere between my mother's last breath and that email in my inbox, my sister did something I couldn't yet name. And deep down, before I had proof, before I had words for it, I felt the first crack of betrayal. The next morning, I woke up with the kind of headache that sits behind your eyes and refuses to move, no matter how much water you drank. My phone was still on the nightstand where I'd left it, face up, silent. No missed calls, no messages from Denise. I stared at the ceiling for a long time, listening to the hum of traffic outside my window, trying to talk myself out of the conclusion my heart had already reached. There has to be an explanation, I told myself. There always is. I showered, dressed, and drove straight to the title company named in the email. It was tucked into a strip mall between a nail salon and a tax preparation office, the kind of place you'd never notice unless you were looking for it. The sign was clean and modern, neutral. Nothing about it suggested the kind of damage it could do to a family. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. A woman behind the desk smiled at me, professional and polite. "Hi, how can I help you?" I gave her my name and the address of the house. I watched her fingers move across the keyboard, her smile tightening just a little as she scanned the screen. "Yes," she said, "that property closed last Friday." "I didn't sign anything," I replied. My voice was steady, even though my hands weren't. I folded them together to keep them from shaking. "I'm a co-owner." She paused, then looked up at me. "We have signatures from both parties." The room felt suddenly too small. "That's not possible," I said. "I've been dealing with my mother's death. I haven't met with anyone." She hesitated, then stood. "Let me get the file." When she came back, she placed a folder on the counter and opened it, turning the pages toward me. There it was, my name, written in a careful imitation of my handwriting. The curve of the letters was almost right. Almost. My stomach dropped. "That's not my signature," I said, louder now. "That's forged." The woman's expression changed then. The polite smile vanished, replaced by something cautious, measured. "I'm going to need to get my manager," she said. I don't remember much of the conversation after that. I remember sitting in a chair that was too stiff, my foot tapping against the floor as I stared at my own name written by someone else's hand. I remember the manager saying words like investigation and legal process. I remember nodding when I didn't fully understand. And I remember one thing very clearly. Denise's signature was right next to mine. Bold, confident, exactly like she always signed her name. Big letters, heavy pressure, like she wanted the ink to know she meant it. I didn't call her again that day. Instead, I went home and pulled out the old file box I'd kept since Dad died. Inside were deeds, insurance policies, handwritten notes in my mother's looping script. I sat on the floor and spread them out,
like puzzle pieces, my grief slowly shifting into something sharper, something colder. The house had been left to both of us, equal shares. That had been clear. There was no clause, no loophole, no permission for one sister to act alone, which meant Denise hadn't just made a decision, she'd made a plan. That night, she finally called. "I was going to tell you," she said, before I could say a word. I closed my eyes and leaned my head back against the couch. "Tell me what, Denise?" There was a pause on the line. I could hear her breathing, controlled, careful. "The house was too much," she continued. "Too many memories. It didn't make sense to keep it sitting there." "You forged my signature," I said. She exhaled slowly. I did what needed to be done. Something in my chest snapped, not loudly, not all at once, but like a thread being pulled too tight for too long. "You did what you wanted to do," I replied, "while I was burying our mother." Her voice hardened. "Don't do that. Don't make this about grief." "Then what is it about?" I asked, "because it feels like you waited until I was too broken to stop you." She didn't answer right away. "You always took too long to decide things," she said finally. "I've been carrying this family for years. I handled Mom's finances. I handled repairs. I handled everything." "That's not true," I said. "I was there every day." "You were emotional," she snapped. "I was practical." There it was, the same argument we'd had our entire lives, dressed up in new clothes. Growing up, Denise had always been the one teachers called a leader. I was reliable. When Dad needed help fixing something, he'd ask her opinion. When Mom needed someone to sit quietly with her, she'd call me. I had told myself that balance was love. Now it felt like permission. "You stole from me," I said quietly. "You made a decision," she corrected, "and you'll get your share." "My share of what?" I asked. "Of something you sold behind my back?" The line went silent. Then she said, "If you make this ugly, you're going to tear the family apart." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You already did." The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork and appointments. I hired a lawyer, a calm woman with kind eyes who listened without interrupting, as I told her everything. She didn't gasp or shake her head. She simply nodded and said, "We'll take this one step at a time." Denise stopped calling. When word spread through the family, reactions were mixed. Some said Denise was wrong, others said I should let it dow. "It's just a house," one aunt told me over the phone. "Your sister didn't mean harm." But it wasn't just a house. It was the place my father taught me how to ride a bike, the kitchen where my mother burned every first pancake on purpose because she said it was bad luck to eat it, the hallway where Denise and I once measured our heights in pencil marks on the wall, competing to see who'd grow taller. It was proof that my life had mattered, that I had roots, and Denise had sold it like it was furniture. As the legal process moved forward, more things came to light. Emails, conversations with realtors that predated Mom's death, a timeline that showed intention, not impulse. I read every document with a heaviness in my chest, each new piece confirming what I had tried so hard to not believe. This wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. And soon, I would have to make one too.
The first court letter arrived on a Tuesday, folded neatly into an envelope that looked too clean for the weight it carried. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time before opening it, my coffee untouched, going cold beside me. The morning light slanted through the blinds, cutting the room into stripes, and I remember thinking how strange it was that the world still looked so normal. Inside were dates, legal language, and my sister's name printed again and again like it belonged there more than mine did. I called my lawyer, and she walked me through it patiently. She explained forgery laws, civil consequences, restitution. Her voice was calm, measured, the voice of someone who had seen this kind of thing before. I wondered how many families she'd watched fracture across polished conference tables. "What do you want out of this?" she asked me gently. I didn't answer right away. What did I want? Justice, yes, but justice came in many forms. I wanted Denise to admit what she'd done. I wanted her to look at me and say my name the way she used to when we were kids, before everything became a competition. I wanted my mother's house back, even though I knew it was already gone, its rooms emptied, its walls repainted for strangers. Mostly, I wanted to stop feeling like I was disappearing. I want the truth acknowledged, I said finally, and I don't want her to be able to do this again, not to me, not to anyone. My lawyer nodded. Then we proceed. Denise didn't come to the first hearing. Her lawyer did, young, sharply dressed, confident in that way people get when they believe their client has a story that will sell. He argued that Denise had acted under stress, that grief had impaired her judgment, that she believed she had verbal consent. When it was my turn to speak, I kept my voice even. I never gave permission, I said, not verbally, not in writing, and I was never informed. Denise finally appeared at the second hearing. She sat across the room from me, her hair styled, her posture straight. She didn't look at me, not once. It was like I'd become a stranger, someone's presence she acknowledged only by the way her jaw tightened. As proceedings went on, evidence was introduced. Emails between Denise and the realtor dated months before Mom passed, text messages where she discussed timing and signatures, a scanned copy of the forged document enlarged on a screen so everyone could see the careful mimicry of my name. The judge leaned forward, studying it. "Miss Harris," he said to Denise, "do you recognize this signature?" "Yes," she replied, "it's my sister's." "Is it her handwriting?" There was a pause. "I believed I was acting in her best interest," Denise said instead. The judge's expression didn't change. That was not my question. Something shifted in the room then, a subtle change, but I felt it like a breath of air after being underwater too long. Denise glanced at me just for a second. Her eyes weren't angry, they were afraid. Outside the courthouse, our cousin Marlene caught up with me. "I didn't know it was this bad," she said, shaking her head. "She told everyone you agreed." I nodded slowly. "I know." That was the hardest part. Not just what Denise had done, but how easily the story had traveled without me in it, how many people had accepted her version because it was simpler, kinder, less uncomfortable. At family gatherings, sides formed quietly. Invitations stopped coming. Conversations ended when I entered a room. Some relatives called me brave. Others called me stubborn. "You're ruining your relationship over money," an uncle said. I wanted to tell him it wasn't about money, that it was about trust, about being seen, about not letting someone rewrite your life while you're still standing in it. But I was tired of explaining. As the case progressed, more details surfaced. Denise had been struggling financially for years. Credit card debt, a second mortgage she'd never mentioned. The house sale hadn't just been about convenience, it had been about survival, or at least that's how she framed it. "I didn't think you'd understand," she said during mediation. "You've always been so careful, so slow." I looked at her across the table, at the sister who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, who once defended me from a school bully twice her size. "You didn't give me the chance to understand," I said. "You decided for me." Her shoulders slumped just slightly. "I didn't think you'd fight me." That hurt more than I expected, because she was right. She'd counted on my silence, on my grief, on the version of me who always smoothed things over, who stepped back to keep the peace. But that version of me had been buried with my mother. The judge ruled 3 months later. The sale could not be undone, the house was legally transferred to new owners who had acted in good faith, but Denise was found liable for fraud and ordered to compensate me for my full share plus legal fees. More than that, the ruling acknowledged what she had done in clear, unmistakable language: forgery, deception, breach of trust.
When I heard the words, I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. Denise avoided me after that. She paid what she owed in installments, each check arriving without a note, without apology. Family gatherings became smaller, quieter, and in the space where my childhood home once stood in my heart, there was now an absence I had to learn how to live with. But something else took its place too, a steadiness. I began to sleep through the night again. I started taking walks in the evenings, noticing the sound of my own footsteps, the way the air cooled after sunset. I planted a small herb garden on my apartment balcony, pressing my fingers into the soil and reminding myself that growth didn't require permission. One afternoon, months later, Denise called. "I hear you're doing well," she said. "I'm healing," I replied. There was a long silence between us, heavy, honest. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said finally. "I know," I answered, and I did, but knowing didn't change what had happened. We ended the call without resolution, without promises, and for the first time I understood that closure doesn't always come from reconciliation. Sometimes it comes from standing your ground and learning to live with the echo.
After the ruling, life didn't suddenly become easier, but it became clearer. The noise died down first. No more court dates, no more thick envelopes in the mail, no more waking up with my heart racing, wondering what new detail would surface. The silence that replaced it felt strange at first, like walking into a room after a loud machine has been turned off. You expect the sound to come back, but it didn't. I returned to work full-time. My coworkers were kind in that careful way people get when they don't know how much to ask. One woman left a sticky note on my desk that said, "Glad you're back." I kept it in my drawer longer than I needed to. In the evenings, I cooked again. Simple meals, soup that simmered slowly, toast that burned sometimes because I got distracted watching the steam rise from the pot. I started lighting a candle at night, the lavender kind my mother loved, letting the scent fill the room until it felt like she was sitting nearby, quiet but present. Still, the house haunted me. Every time I drove past Willow Lane, I slowed without meaning to. The new owners had painted the siding a pale gray. The maple tree was still there, but the pencil marks on the hallway wall, the ones that tracked Denise's and my height year by year, were gone, scrubbed away like they'd never existed. One Saturday afternoon, I parked down the street and walked past the house on foot. I'd told myself it was just curiosity, that I wanted to see it one last time. A woman stood in the front yard watering flowers. She smiled at me politely, the way you smile at strangers who pass by your home. "Lovely place," I said, my voice steady. "Thank you," she replied. "We feel very lucky." I nodded and kept walking, my throat tightening only once I turned the corner. Lucky. That word followed me home. Denise and I existed in a kind of careful distance after that. We exchanged holiday texts, brief updates about work, no depth, no warmth, just acknowledgement that the other still existed. Once, she sent a photo of her daughter at a school recital. I stared at it for a long time before replying with a heart emoji. I missed my niece, missed the way she used to curl into my side during movies, her hair smelling like shampoo and crayons. I wondered what Denise told her, what version of the story she'd grown up with. There were days I'd questioned myself, wondered if I'd gone too far, if I'd chosen justice at the cost of family. Those doubts crept in late at night when the world was quiet and my thoughts had room to stretch out. On one of those nights, I pulled out my mother's old recipe box. The cards were worn, smudged with grease and handwriting that slanted slightly to the right. I flipped through them slowly until I found one in particular. Sunday chicken. On the back, in my mother's handwriting, was a note I'd never noticed before. Home is where truth lives. Don't protect lies just to keep people comfortable. I sat there for a long time, that card resting in my lap, and let the words settle into me. The public consequences came later, quietly. Denise's reputation took a hit, not loudly, not dramatically,
but enough. She lost a promotion she'd been expecting, a few friends pulled away, people became cautious around her, asking more questions, trusting less easily. She called me one evening, her voice tired in a way I hadn't heard before. "They don't look at me the same anymore," she said. "I know," I replied. There was a pause. Then she asked, "Was it worth it?" I thought about the house, about the courtrooms, about the nights I'd cried myself to sleep wondering if I was doing the right thing. "Yes," I said, "because I can look at myself without flinching." She didn't argue. Healing wasn't dramatic. It didn't arrive with a single moment of forgiveness or a tearful apology. It came in pieces. It came when I stopped explaining my choices to people who didn't want to understand. When I stopped wishing Denise would become the sister I needed instead of the one she was. It came when I took the money from the settlement and didn't spend it right away. I let it sit, untouched, until one day I realized what it represented. Not greed, not revenge, but acknowledgement. Eventually, I used part of it to buy a small cottage on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, white shutters, a creaky front step, a backyard just big enough for a garden. On the day I got the keys, I stood in the empty living room and let the silence wrap around me. It felt different from the silence after my mother died. This one wasn't hollow, it was open. I painted the kitchen a warm yellow, hung my mother's old clock on the wall, planted rosemary and basil by the back door. Slowly, intentionally, I built a new place to hold my memories, not to replace the old house, but to honor it. One afternoon, as I was unpacking a box of photos, I found a picture of Denise and I sitting on the front steps of Willow Lane. We were young, knees scraped, hair tangled, smiling like the world hadn't taught us how to hurt each other yet. I didn't cry. I placed the photo in a frame and set it on a shelf, not because I wanted to forget what she'd done, but because I refused to let betrayal erase everything that came before it. That was my choice. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but peace.
Time has a quiet way of teaching you what really mattered. Months passed in my little cottage, marked not by court dates or family tension, but by ordinary things. The way sunlight hit the kitchen table in the morning, the sound of the floorboard near the hallway that always creaked no matter how many times I told myself I'd fix it. The rhythm of my own life returning, one calm day at a time. I hosted my first Thanksgiving there alone. I cooked too much food, out of habit more than hunger. As the turkey roasted, the smell filled the house, warm and familiar, and for a moment my chest tightened the way it always did around holidays. I set the table for one, then paused, stared at the empty chair across from me, and almost added another plate. Almost. Instead, I sat down, folded my napkin in my lap the way my mother had taught me, and said a quiet thank you into the room. Not to anyone in particular, just to the life that was still unfolding, even after everything I'd lost. That was the thing grief never tells you, that it doesn't end, but it does soften. It loosens its grip enough for other feelings to breathe. One afternoon in early spring, Denise showed up unannounced. I saw her car from the kitchen window and felt my stomach tighten, not with fear, but with something closer to readiness. I wiped my hands on a towel and opened the door before she knocked. She looked smaller somehow, tired, older than I remembered. "I won't stay long," she said. "That's okay," I replied. "You can sit if you want." She stepped inside and glanced around, taking in the yellow walls, the sunlight, the framed photo on the shelf. Her eyes lingered on the picture of us as children. "I didn't know you kept that," she said. "I kept it for me," I answered. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where I'd read court letters and cried into cold coffee months earlier. Now the air between us was heavy, but not sharp. "I've been thinking a lot," she began. "About Mom, about Dad, about us." I waited. "She was scared," she said quietly, "about money, about failing,
and instead of asking for help, I took control. I studied her face, the familiar angles softened by regret. "You didn't just take control," I said. "You took my choice." She nodded, her eyes glistening. "I know." There was no dramatic apology, no collapse into tears, just honesty, plain and uncomfortable. "I don't expect forgiveness," she added. "I just needed you to know I see it now." That was the moment I'd imagined for so long, my sister finally understanding, and yet it didn't feel like triumph. It felt like closure, knocking softly, asking to be let in. "I'm glad you see it, but understanding doesn't rewind time." She swallowed. "I know." We sat there a while longer, talking about small things, her kids, my garden, the weather. When she left, she hugged me gently, like she wasn't sure she still had the right. I let her. After that, something shifted inside me. Not forgiveness, not fully, but release. I stopped replaying the betrayal in my mind, stopped imagining different outcomes, different words I could have said. I accepted the truth as it was. My sister had chosen herself over me, and I had chosen myself in return. Both choices carried consequences. I visited my mother's grave one morning with a bouquet of lavender. I knelt there, brushing dirt from the headstone, and told her everything. Not the legal details, not the bitterness, but the ending. "I stood up for myself," I said out loud. "I didn't disappear." The wind moved gently through the trees, and for the first time in a long while, my chest didn't ache. Now, when people ask me if I regret taking my sister to court, I answer honestly. "No," I say. "I regret that I had to." Because the truth is, justice didn't give me my childhood home back, it didn't restore our relationship to what it once was, but it gave me something quieter and more lasting, my dignity. I learned that loving your family doesn't mean letting them erase you, that grief doesn't excuse betrayal, and that peace sometimes comes not from keeping the past intact, but from building something new with clear eyes and steady hands. I still miss the house on Willow Lane. I always will. But I don't miss the version of myself who stayed silent to keep the peace. She served her purpose. Then she stepped aside. And the woman who took her place, she knows her worth.
Sometimes when I sit on my back steps in the early evening, I think about how close I came to staying silent, how easy it would have been to say, "It's already done," and let the betrayal fade into family history as one more unspoken wound. How tempting it was to protect everyone else's comfort at the expense of my own truth. For a long time, that's what I thought love looked like. But here's what I learned the hard way. Peace that costs you your dignity is not peace at all. It's just quiet pain. Standing up for myself didn't make me cruel. It didn't make me greedy. It made me honest. And honesty, even when it fractures relationships, has a way of putting you back together. I don't tell this story because I think I handled everything perfectly. I tell it because I know someone listening right now is standing at a similar crossroads, torn between keeping the peace and speaking the truth, between family loyalty and self-respect. If that's you, I want you to know this. You're allowed to take up space in your own life. You're allowed to say no, and you're allowed to demand fairness, even from the people who share your blood. The house on Willow Lane is gone, but the woman who walked away from it is stronger, steadier, and finally at pace with who she chose to become. Now I want to ask you, what would you have done in my place? Would you have stayed silent to protect the family, or stood up for yourself and faced the consequences? If this story touched you, please let me know in the comments. I read them, and your stories matter here too. Thank you for sitting with me through this journey, for your support, and for giving these stories a place to be heard. And if you'd like to hear more real-life stories like this, stories of betrayal, truth, and healing, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Your support helps keep these voices alive.